And we're live. Welcome back, everyone, to the HVAC 2.0 show. Tonight we just have a small crew of just me and Ted tonight, unless some more people kind of drop in. But I guess we can just get right to it. We'll start with the new order of the free quote visit that we have.
Have you spent any time on it?
I've I've read through it, but I've not used it yet.
Okay.
The last one I did a kind of a modified version of this of someone that was looking for a whole house dehumidifier. And so I kind of just took the free quote process and just kind of reordered some things because they were, obviously if they're looking for a dehumidifier, it was new house, new unit, but high humidity. They come to the conclusion of a whole house dehumidifier. And so I kind of just revamped in the sense to make it work for that because I kind of had to lead them to a place of either going, yes, I want a dehumidifier, or no, I want to replace the unit and address the real problem. But that's
Okay.
only thing I've done so far. So I've read through this, but I've not used it yet to really see how it feels.
How do you want to proceed? You want me to read through it or do you want to read through it? You want me to read through
Um,
it and you can interrupt me in places
sure.
where you think it needs um,
Yeah, we can just start.
modification?
If you want to go through it, and then we'll just kind of take little, at certain points we can kind of talk about it, pick it apart, and that sort of thing.
Okay. Is my cursor? Yeah, it's showing up. Okay. So I'm going to go to the screen. Um, so this, as we're working through the free quote process and tightening it up and making it easier and also more effective. Um, there are two ways to be thinking about the free quote process, and one is the visit, and then the second is the report, which basically revisits the visit and reconfirms everything that was discussed at the visit and memorializes what occurred at the visit. Um, and by memorializing everything that's done at the visit, it does a whole lot of things. It should flush out areas where homeowners were confused, because if they were confused at the visit and then they're confused by the report, then it gives them an opportunity to address that confusion
Yeah,
or bring it to the attention of the salesperson.
yeah,
Um, and if they don't address it and they've been given so many opportunities to address it, then it becomes a memorial of what actually happened and what was conveyed at that visit, and therefore makes the homeowner own responsibility for the things that they didn't understand. Because particularly with the follow-up of using the report, you're really, Sandler says, actually, I think this is basic communication where if you're going to do a presentation, you first tell them what you're going to tell them, and then you tell it to them, and then you tell them what you told them.
yeah,
And in this case, it's not so much telling; it's you're going to discuss and outline what you're going to discuss. I'm here to help you. Well, do you have a? You're interested in new equipment? Did you have a specification? And then typically the answer is going to be no. And would you the next thing would be, would you like me to help you build one? So I don't know if it's okay, let's build one, or okay, would you like me to help you to build one? I think
I think yeah, it would be would you like to build one? Because if they're just like hardcore, like I don't care, I'm just looking for a price, you don't want to go through a whole exercise for nothing because people like that, odds are,
there each of these things is opt outs.
yeah,
Like
and
you were given the opportunity to opt out and give me your specification, or
Yeah.
yeah, I no, I don't have a specification. Oh, now that you're pushing me for a specification, no, I don't want to build one. I just want you to replace like for like.
Yeah. Exactly. Because
Um,
that's what that type of person is. Someone that's like, no, I don't want to go through this nonsense. They're just going to be like, just give me what's already there, like
right,
that
right,
sort of
right.
thing.
Okay, and if they did that, um, you could probably skip the six functions video and even building the templates. But I think you still have to, I mean, like you might be able to go straight to, okay, well, here's your likely load range. Um, and what we can also do is help you understand your duct constraints. Would you like me to take duct pressure?
Yeah.
And if they say no to that, then I think you say, okay, so I just need you to watch this 60-second video so that I can prove to my employer, um, that I educated you about duct pressure and the concerns about duct pressure, and you opted out.
Yeah.
Because to some extent, if you don't have some control over the interview, you should just leave.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like
If you
you,
don't, you're
I'm
just
out here for free, and
yeah.
there's a minimum amount of information that I need to convey to you, whether you want it conveyed or not.
Yeah.
And if you can't handle, so maybe we should noodle this through a little bit, because the six functions video is only 4 minutes. And I sort of feel like if they can't watch, or maybe it's 5 minutes, if they can't watch a 5 minute video and a 1 minute video, um, that's a tremendous amount of disrespect for your time and the fact that you've actually come to their house. And so, and I think that kind of situation is going to be exceedingly rare, because I haven't heard of anybody. I mean, Reedy was the one that pivoted, I think, from offering to share the videos to just sharing them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we do need probably a shortcut, or maybe we don't. Maybe we say, well, I have this questionnaire that, in order to keep my job, I need to complete. And what we'll do is we'll just say no next to all of the questions.
Hmm.
I mean, because what they can do, if they is they can actually, instead of, probably it's not best practice to ever leave a house without being asked to leave. Because if you leave, you're the petulant child who's not getting his way. And so you leave sort of owning some responsibility for that. Does that kind of make any sense?
When you say that, you mean kind of just in the sense of if someone is going, I don't want anything that I'm not following whatever you're trying to put down. And so if you take that and just go, well, then if you're not doing that, well, then I'm just not going to help you. I'm leaving. Rather than at least going like, okay, we're still going, like, we have to go through this. It's fine if you are not interested at all. We'll just mark nothing. But just for the sake of going through the motions, we're still going to
We'll,
have to go through this.
we'll just mark that you were not interested in responding, not interested
Yeah.
in responding, not interested in responding. And that way I can show to my boss that I did my job. They want me to go through this questionnaire.
Yeah. Which also, what we might could do is obviously you wouldn't have to ask all the questions, but such as like, uh, well, I don't know, I'd have to look through it again, but you could probably just go, okay, well then I'm just gonna, we'll just mark nothing, we'll just mark NA or no response on all these. And then as you go through it, you can just, be like, okay, let's see, what were you expecting this new system to do that your old system doesn't? Then you can just be like, oh, well, wasn't expecting anything. Or if it gets to, is there any X problems? Nope, no problems there. Do you have any noise complaints? Nope, no noise complaints at all. And so you're reading it out and you're answering it as them by saying, I have zero problems happening with the current system. And if everything stays the same, I'll be perfectly content. Or if it gets worse, it's perfectly okay. And so then they're going to have to like hear that and be like, sure, I'm going to, you're kind of negative reversing them in the sense but you're not asking a question at the same time. Because that is something where if someone's being a little difficult with that, that is kind of what I like to try to do is I will think out loud in a sense of basically being like, oh, okay, I'm sure, I know you have, there's no problems you're looking to really take care of. I will assume that there's zero problems and I will just say it out loud, like as if I'm thinking out loud. So that way
Hmm.
when they agree with me, they're agreeing, like I'm walking this
Right.
through basically
Interrupt
going,
me
you
if I get it, if I get an answer wrong.
yeah. And so when they, if you say all these things and you're like, oh yeah, and you'll be completely okay with this, you'll be completely okay with that, and as they agree with you along this process, well then like they can't say anything after the fact if they get what you just what they agreed to getting with that. Um,
Yeah.
which also with those types of people, you're also typically just kind of getting they're there because they just want to know a price.
Right.
And
Right.
so again, for them, it's like I just basically would be like, okay, well, I guess you're probably just really wanting like the cheapest thing possible. Like that's the only thing that matters. We're not really worried about quality. It seems like we can probably just reuse a lot of this other stuff. Is that right? And I'll kind of like, take them along there. If they're like, yes, um, I'm really just trying to like go through it for the sake of just going through it. And then at the end, I'm going to be like, here's your here's your number. Tell me no right now. Like I'm going to show you what my price is, and I really don't think you're going to want this. I'm negative reversing them hard, and I'm just going to be like, just tell me no. And
Right.
and
So
sometimes like
another
they
one. So another one is, you know, are you looking for the absolute cheapest thing you can find?
I don't say
Or
equipment. I just say, are you looking for just the cheapest option total? Because I don't want to tie it to equipment
okay.
per se, because I'm wanting it to be like, are you just looking for someone that's just going to cheaply give you a cheap service? Like I want them to say that's what I'm looking for. Uh, and if they say yes, well then I pretty much know at that point that I'm not going to be getting that. There's going to be somebody else for sure that's going to be cheaper. But
Right.
most of the time, people are going to be like, well, I don't really want the cheapest. Then they'll say something, they'll use their own words to say, I'm looking for the best value. So then you can start to like rewind that when that's the more likely scenario of they just don't want to overspend in what they have in their mind as overspend. So
Okay.
I want to get them to tell me I'm looking for the best value. So then you can say, okay, when you like, what's the best value to you? Like, would you like to kind of build an ideal specification that suits to you? And
That's tailored to that.
yeah, and
Yeah.
so then you can start kind of pulling all this together to be what framing it in what they're looking for. Because in their mind, the best value is who can do it the cheapest. But then if we all know that you have to kind of rewire that. And for me, that's that's always been the route that and this isn't just for install neither. This is also for repairs as well,
Right.
because it's the same thing that's kind of taking place of, when you ask them, hey, what do you want to do? No matter what the thing is, if they're kind of throwing up those types of, you know, hesitations and stuff, it's like, okay, well then what is it that you're really worried about? Like, do you just want the absolute lowest dollar amount for the thing you're asking for? Or are you looking to get the best value for you? Because those are two different things.
Okay.
And I think a lot of that also kind of comes back to, like, in Sandler, how it basically will say that what you're wanting to do is describe their problem better than they can describe it. You're kind of doing the same thing of when they're posing this problem, if you can reword it in a better way that even it's even better than what they're saying, you're just more closely getting to that end result there, you know. Because like I said, a lot of times, when people kind of go that route, they're usually not just looking for the cheapest thing possible, because most people will say, "Oh, well, I don't want just the cheapest thing," because in their mind they're going, "I don't want crap. I'm looking for the best value." It's just they don't have a lot of times they don't have that word. Sometimes they do. Sometimes I'm looking for, what's the best bang for my buck or something like that. And that's how you can. I feel like that's like a strong thing to kind of get to when it gets to that point.
Okay. Now this, I think, soon we're going to get this reordered, at least in the visit script. I think it's sort of in the right order in the report. Um, Let me go. In there. Let's take a look. So this is the order of the report. Let me see if I can share that as another stop. Present. Yeah. Okay, here it is. So this is the Reedy sample that we built a long time ago. And this is going to get filled in some more, so it's has some explanation. But here's the 4 questions quiz, and in front of it's going to be the answer to the one question. Were you hoping your new equipment's going to solve any problems that your old equipment didn't solve, or however we end up with a final. What do you have final wording for that you're comfortable with?
Um, Nothing. I don't have any. There's not anything that I'm like, yes, this is absolutely it. Because I could see it being, is there anything that you're hoping the new equipment is going to do that your old equipment didn't, or maybe is there anything that you're expecting new equipment to fix,
That
or
yes, that's really nice. That you've been frustrated with in your
yeah,
about your old equipment. Yeah, yeah. Um, we have to fix this score thing at some point.
yeah,
I think we'll probably have some wording in the drop down for the questionnaire that explains that a lot of people are in a
yeah,
hurry. They're probably going to need like a 35 or a 30 for it to be a pivot to a
yeah.
comfort consult.
What if we did a range with that as well? Like be 0 to whatever the mat, let's see. I mean, I guess it'd be 40,
40.
0 to 40, and it'd be like from 30 to 40 being like a red zone of like severe problems, opposite end being no problems. yellow in between the two, and then you might could have like a bracket that says, you
I
know,
guess it's possible you could have a house that really is too expensive to fix, and so you need to take them to Comfort Consult because what they really need is to be offered a comprehensive planning process.
yeah,
Because a house like that might need larger equipment, but this is seems to be the predominant problem these
yeah,
houses are having, right? Is insufficient duct.
yeah,
So, you know, how many houses you going to run across that are not only in the red, but it's going to be way too expensive to move them into the yellow or the green with some envelope improvements um, that are more expensive than replacing the whole ductwork.
yeah.
I mean,
Which I
ten to
mean,
$20,000 on ductwork that you don't need instead of encapsulating your crawl space or your attic. That's going to be a pretty, you know,
yeah,
we
um,
haven't. That's a unicorn. I mean, I know we need to assume that it exists, but it feels like that's probably pretty rare.
yeah.
Um,
But also, it's also rare, for at least from what I've seen, for people to really give a high score on the four questions, especially for how what we're targeting with this free quote process. Because
right,
most
because they're
people,
already hesitant.
yeah, well, and most people, like, let's assume they do have some, like, say you have this, bedroom over garage that heats and cools poorly. You typically are going to have decently high scores for hot rooms, cold rooms, but then like the health issues and the moisture issues are going to be typically low. So it's like even if you max them out, mid 20s is going
Right.
to be, about as high as that type of situation would be. It's going to take, okay, you've got a really screwed up house with health issues that you're dealing with known moisture problems, like all in the same go. And that's something that's like, if you have that going on, you definitely need to go to Comfort Consult because you're going to be you need that pre-step to the CPP, or at least to kind of get a sense of what direction to go. Is it just really
We
messed up
need to
HVAC or
understand if you got certain rooms that just have
yeah,
crazy leaks that you're not aware of.
yeah,
So we're going to need zonal and we're going to need blower
yeah,
door. You can't go to a homeowner and say, "Well, we need zonal and blower door." So,
yeah,
I mean, how nice would that be if they could
yeah,
just,
yeah,
you know? Um, yeah. Okay. So, and then the heating system. I think Eric's done a nice job with this.
yes,
Um, and I've actually been working on the narrative. Like this narrative, I think, has to really be look. If even if you size to the yellow, if you're going, so the conversation I had, I don't know if it was with Ronnie or was it with you this week about if you're selling single stage, you really got to lean to the green. And even if it's two stage, the lower stage should be over here to the left of the green so that you
yeah,
can get some low long runs on that low stage. Because what people are seeing out there is they're going out to a 3.5-ton single stage and replacing it with a 4-ton two stage. That would be this situation right here, 42,000 BTU, and they're going over to here. Well, on low stage, you're still up here, which is
yeah,
insufficient duct and grossly oversized. So you got short cycling and no
yes,
dehumidification.
yep,
So, like, what we really want I mean, it would be worst case to go 2.5-ton two stage.
Yeah.
because then you're not even getting into the yellow, which is likely going to be short cycling a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we're. I mean, it's sort of feeling like most houses, even with comfort consult, are sized in the green, unless they're pretty darn leaky. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, I would say so.
So since we got a pretty good range on what the worst case load is with likely load range, um, this is where the better equipment really comes into play because, you know, if you're going to go with a 3-ton heat pump in a situation like this, or not even like this, let's say that this was moved over by a ton, you really want to be able to get over here in your smallest stage. And the only way to do that is with an inverter driven heat pump.
Yeah.
You know, because you really want the equipment where most of the load occurs so it can run. And this likely load range is it's about worst case, not common case. Um, and I think tying static pressure to insufficient duct, offering measure quick so that people can see third party verification that their 4-ton system only delivered 2.5 ton of capacity. Um, it's going to make all those light bulbs go off.
Yeah.
Um, and then the 6 functions decision table. This is helping them build their specification by helping them narrow in on, oh, the modulating heat pump is definitely out of my price range. So could I reach and do a modulating hybrid? Maybe. 2-stage is kind of in my price range. Okay, so let me see what the 2-stage gives me. Okay, so I don't have any of these things now. I don't have load matching, mixing, dehumidification. I have terrible filtration and no fresh air. So, but this will be better because it'll run more continuous. And so you move down to the building your specification. And again, we compare their current system and the initial specification that they were interested in, clarifying that they may need a supplemental dehumidification because this equipment still may not run long enough, or it, depending on what equipment you get, it may just be continuously trying to run a cold or a warm coil. I mean, Bosch is
Yeah.
not ever going to give you dehumidification,
Yeah.
even if it runs continuous.
Yeah.
Conveying that they could have had reheat if they went with a green speed heat pump.
Yeah.
And that the hybrid, really all you give up with a hybrid is reheat. I gotta fix my smiley faces here. I just built this haphazard.
Yeah. And which another thing, using some of these as well, like when you're talking likely load range, if because for me, what I've kind of found is if you go out to someone's house for a free quote and you've never been to their house before, that's going to be the more difficult hurdle versus if I've already been there several times and I've already, did a measure quick report and was like, hey, you've got a 4-ton unit and it's only doing 2.5 tons of cooling. They at
They're
least,
already, the ground's already tilled.
yeah, because it's different if someone like, sure, they have a 4-ton unit, but they know that it's only doing 2.5 tons of cooling. And then when it gets hot and they've got in their mind that, oh, my 2.5-ton unit is keeping up even when it's really hot, it's going to be easy for them to go, okay, I feel comfortable sizing into the green. If that's not the case from you've never been to the house before, and if it is like they're uncomfortable sizing that single stage or whatever into the green, you can be like, okay, well, just so you know, like here's where we would be at if we size to a 3 ton instead of the two. Uh, and if it's needed, what would it look like if we needed to add a dehumidifier to help with the other humidity load? What do you think about that? And then you can at least open up this conversation and be like, okay, and just so you know, over here in this far column where we kind of add this, if we needed to add this in the future, here's what that looks like. We know that will help take care of things. So if it makes you feel better that way, but just know that this is roughly what the cost is for that. So at least that way you can kind of pre-lay out some of these things depending on what are they most worried about.
Hmm. So one of the things that I'm also thinking about as I think about this process is that maybe you tell them up front.
Hmm.
So today I'm here to help you with our free quote process. We all also do have a service called a comfort consult. Um, but before finalizing or before settling on, before you are comfortable settling on your replacement specification.
I like that.
Okay. So you let them know up front, hey, this is a free quote. Um, if at some point you feel like you want to pivot to a comfort consult, that would be a thing that we schedule for another day. And so today, what we're doing is a free quote. And
Yeah.
and we found that we need to go all the way through the free quote, even if it's at some point partway through you decide you want a comfort consult, because it'll provide us information that's useful for the comfort consult.
Yeah.
Um, so this gets us, then we came to the duct pressure step. That's going to get shifted. I think that gets shifted. Well, mostly that video is going to get shifted below the 6 functions video so that you've had a chance to help them understand the 6 functions, see if there are any functions that they don't have now that they really would like to have with their new equipment, and get them prepared for the tables where they're going to get an understanding of the equipment that matches to the 6 functions. But then before you go to the tables, we need to bring in likely load range. And then after likely load range, we need to bring in duct pressure. So
Okay, so you think you need to do the likely load range exercise before you do the duct pressure?
I think we need to do well, yeah, I think we need to let them know that where their equipment lines up to houses their size, the size that
Yeah.
I
And then
think you
tip,
need to get them thinking, okay, our equipment is this size. Similar houses have equipment this size. Our equipment might be oversized.
yeah.
Because
And then
then you can go to the duct pressure and say, even if our equipment isn't oversized, we need to either go down in size or replace the duct.
yeah, that's what I was about to say. It actually doing it that way does kind of help to layer in some of that because like likely load range is going to be something that needs explained anyways of like what is this, and then being able to hold off on the duct limitations and then layer that in after you get through the likely load range uh, may add some may make it easier to understand and it be a little more clear.
I think people need, like, that's why it felt like we needed to put that drop dead mark of
Yeah.
you you probably have sufficient ductwork and you probably don't. The other thing that we're adding to the static pressure is it's got a bunch of check boxes, because when you think about the airflow of a system, there are a number of ways to arrive at an estimate with ever increasing precision.
Mm-hmm.
And um, some people can arrive at an estimate. They've done enough duct testing. They can arrive at an estimate just by looking at the duct. But that's going to be a low confidence duct assessment that's provided for free as part of the free quote process.
Yeah.
Maybe you pull out your tape measure and measure it and calculate it from the supply and return trunks. I would think that would also be free. But you be able to notate it. And then the next one is to take static pressure. And then the next one is measure quick. And the next one is measure quick with true flow. Would that
Yeah.
seem to be sort of from a narrowing in perspective,
Well,
ever
w-
more accuracy and precision? Would that sort of be the hierarchy going down the funnel?
with all things being equal, yes. The
Okay.
only thing at a free quote though is if the unit isn't operational,
Then
then
you're going to have to do visual.
yeah, that's well, even if like you can have the blower operating, but if you don't have heating and cooling, because like
Oh, you can't
for
use measure quick,
yeah, you can't
but you
use
can
measure
get
quick.
but you can
So
get static.
yes, and so like
So there may be constraints based on equipment function, and there may be constraints based on homeowner willingness to pay for a test.
yes, yes, that's definitely the homeowner being willing to pay $30 for a test. That's going to be the first level of it, but you can also layer this in of going, you know, also just keep in mind as long as we get the equipment correct, if something happens and we are wrong about the ductwork and it's still too small, we can always replace that afterwards. That's an easier upgrade and replacement than it is to replace brand new equipment by getting that wrong. So I put the preface on that. Um, and then on top of that, if especially for the just visual inspection aspect, I tend to kind of go about it with like, here's what you have, and here's what I have put in the past, and compare that. Then let's
Right.
say, for instance, if it seems small, I'll be like, well, I'll just let you know, from when I've put some in, your return duct is a 14-inch. For this size of system, most of the time when I do the design and see what's actually needed, I tend to see a minimum 16-inch. So you're just kind of relaying, like, here's what I'm seeing.
Here's what
Uh,
I'm seeing.
yeah, it's like, what do you think? And if they're, because then I want to know, are they in the space of, like, I know it's right. Well, then I'm not pushing back on that. I'll be like, okay, that's, we can definitely do that. Just, and also, just so you know, like, if something happens and it is too small, we can always do it. We can always fix this later. We can. That's always an option. Um, but then if they're kind of, if they seem that they're more concerned with, I want this to be a one and done thing, then you're going to have to, like, weigh. That's you, as the salesperson, is going to have to look at that situation and take it in which direction that it seems to be. But you just need to guide them appropriately by giving them the best information that you can, but without being overly confident in something that is not the most accurate. Because, like, I mean, if you've got leaky duct work on an old PSC
Right.
motor with a dirty blower motor, and
Right.
even if you do check static pressure and it's low, that doesn't necessarily mean that everything's a-okay. So, you know, there's you just
This is helping us get us pointed. If you're a blind man trying to shoot at the side of the barn, some of this stuff, all it really does is it gets us pointed at the barn.
yes,
If the
yes,
barn's to the south of you and you're pointed north, you're not even pointed at the barn.
yes. And really, I feel like in that you're wanting to convey that the best you can, because at the end of the day, the only way that it can be 100%, if they come and they say, hey, price doesn't matter, it has to be, like, dead nuts perfect. The only thing you can do is tear everything out, design it, and install it the way that it should. So
Right.
we know that for a fact. We also
Right.
know that we have no clue if we just tear out a unit and put in the same exact size. So anything in between, you have to approach it from a place of, okay, we're not dealing with certainty at any point. So you just want to convey, hey, like, we checked static pressure, where we did this visual inspection. Here's what it seems to me like, but I'll be honest, I could be wrong because I'm not designing it right now. I'm just looking at it, going based on experience. Here's what I've seen. I'm
Right.
conveying this to you. What do you think of
Right.
that?
I'm not measuring airflow at the room.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of things that we could do, but it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of investment on your part to do that level of due diligence. And we're finding that offering this process tends to help people understand what they need to understand to make good decisions and
Yes.
get outcomes that they're very pleased with,
Yes. As
and
concisely as possible.
avoid headache. Like, we're hearing about headaches throughout the industry, and here's
Hmm.
this, you know, Facebook post by this attorney who says he's got 12 homeowners and they're going to start a class action case against this HVAC contractor
Yeah.
because he's oversized the equipment to the ductwork.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that's the other thing I've been thinking about is, like, when we're doing likely load range, if you're doing more than single stage, you really want your low stage to be to the left of the green.
Yes.
because you don't want low stage to be at risk of being your worst case load, because then high stage equipment will never run on high stage, and you don't
Yeah.
get the benefit of having two stage is so that the equipment runs in mild weather
Yeah.
longer.
You're just overpaying for a single stage at that point.
You're just overpaying for a single stage.
Yeah. Yeah. Because and that's and you wanting your lower stages to be below the green, like the reason that that is completely true is because the load of the house is fully variable depending on what the outdoor temperature is, and that range is whatever your high design temp peak load all the way to zero and everything in between.
Right.
So that's
Right.
why ideally the smallest unit possible is going to be best because we're going to be able to get close. We're going to be able to get as close to zero as possible, and that's really what we're trying to do is how can we have our output be as close to zero as possible while still maintaining at the highest temps. It's not
Right.
just
So, I mean, when
you
you're
know,
thinking about likely load range, we almost need to say to the left of green is mild weather. Load in mild weather.
hmm hmm,
I mean, pretty soon that ends up being too complicated to be informative.
yeah, that's the tricky part. Is it? I mean, that's that's why this whole thing's difficult because you're trying to convey complex information simply,
Yeah.
and there's a bunch of different ways to do it, which is why there's a bunch of different people doing it different ways. Uh,
Right.
yeah,
Um, I don't know why I made note of suction pressure. Sort of a random. I remember typing
hmm,
it, but I don't remember why. I was like, "Oh, I need to remember that for some reason."
let's see.
Um, and then I think the checklist of offered and discussed needs to come after the tables. I mean, it needs to come kind of at the end.
Yeah, yeah. I think well, it should because it kind of needs to be a recap just to be like,
Yeah, it's a
you know,
recap.
it's a recap and it's also it's you once again going, okay, here's what we talked about, here's what you told me. Is all that true? It is? Okay. For the second time you have told me these same answers.
Yeah, because one of the things you want to make sure that I think you always need to offer a heat pump with reheat.
Yes.
And so that would be a checklist item. I think you always need to offer a heat pump as a hybrid if they want a furnace. Yeah. I just want a furnace and AC. Well, what a lot of people are doing is they're putting heat pumps on their furnaces, and that's called a hybrid. Would you like to talk about that?
Well, the way that I do that is I just say, okay, well, let's say that, well, I want a furnace. Okay, yeah, we can definitely do that. But also, just so you know, all the furnaces I do, I also install a heat pump with it, so that way you get both at the same time. Uh, some people do like to opt to downgrade, but it's about the same price, and you're kind of just losing benefits. And do it that way because I mean, for me anyways, I know people in colder climates where heat pumps aren't very common. Heat pump to AC price difference is a lot bigger. For me, it's not much difference. And so I
Oh,
keep
that's interesting.
I basically keep the prices essentially almost the same or basically the same. And if somebody chooses an AC furnace combo, I just make, a 1% more margin just because it's like additional pricing that I've got to go through and all this other stuff. Like it's just not worth my time and effort. Because I mean, most people are not going to say no to what extra functionality with zero downside. No, don't give
Right,
me that.
right, right. Well, and that actually leads me to the way I think we want to communicate stages and size. Because, like a two stage furnace would be 40 to 60K, and then you're only got a 3 ton. But if you get a hybrid, that heat pump could end up being the low end of your heating load. So, in other words,
Yeah,
you know, this is the guy's furnace, and if he had a 3 ton heat pump, he'd also have a 36,000 BTU stage.
yeah,
So he'd have a 3680 on the heating side.
yeah. Well, and I don't know. Maybe I should do it, add more info there. For that part, I've always just kind of kept it simple with this option. Here's how many stages, or which I call them speeds. Here's how many speeds, which granted I'm mostly doing heat pumps, so I guess with a furnace you would want to call it stages, but I just go heating slash cooling, and then I just do 2/1, keeping it
Okay.
super simple because I feel like when I start adding too much, that it just gets very convoluted. They're just like, what does that mean? Because it's difficult enough to be able to go, okay, Daikin fit, which is in the middle, to a 5 stage to fully variable, and then they're looking at it going, okay, so variable speed, 5 stage, variable speed. What? Why is this 5 stage better than the variable? Like that in itself was already confusing, which that's actually not really a problem anymore because they've went away from the 5 stage. But like in that whole thing, I just kind of come to the conclusion of like I just want to keep it as simple as possible. Like illustrate it the best that I can, but you know, not overshare too much because it just kind of goes too much in a rabbit hole, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
And so for like a hybrid, you're essentially like you said, if you're going single stage equipment, you're basically using single stage equipment and turning it into a two-stage unit. And so I would just translate that to if okay, uh, AC furnace only, 1 stage of heat, 1 stage of cool. Hybrid furnace AC or heat pump furnace, 2 stage heat, 1 stage cooling. And so that would be how I've differentiated the two in that regard and kind of keep it simple like that.
Okay. So looking back at stages, you how do you like how I've done the stages field?
Um,
Single stage is 1 and 1 stage, or if you have a hybrid, it's 2 and 1 stage. One heat, one cool versus 2 heat, one cool.
um,
And then for 2 stage, it's 2 heat, one cool, 2 heat, two cool, Or for a hybrid, it could be 3 heat, 2 cool.
Yeah, for me, because like that is something that's going to be like it's going to require explaining every single time. And so for me, which again, since I pretty much like I offer a hybrid, and then I'll just caveat it with saying, hey, some people do downgrade, but the price is basically the same. And so
Okay.
for me, I wouldn't
It ends
differentiate.
up not even being that big a you don't
Yeah,
have to get them that educated.
yeah. I just go like for this, I would just do away, or if okay, for single stage, it would just be stages, and then besides stages, we'll have parentheses to go in heat slash cool, so that way they'll know what the numbers are for. And then I'll just go 2/1 for the single
Okay,
stage, and then two stage will be 3/2. And then I can
okay,
caveat with saying, and some people, for some reason, will choose to downgrade and have less heating stages or heating speeds, but the price is about the same, and you can word it that way because then most of the time people will be like, oh, okay, well then I'd like, oh yeah, I definitely would just want that, and then there's no confusion. It's straightforward, that sort of thing.
okay, and then when I talk about size, I'm also adding range of output. Like a 1
Yeah,
ton, 60K, 3 ton,
yeah,
2 stage would be, 40 to 60K, and it might be 2 to 3 ton.
yeah, I do like that.
And then modulating hybrid is 20 to 60 with 2 to 3 ton. And then the green speed is 1 to 3 ton. It's actually less than 1, right? It's 7,500 BTU
Yeah,
to 36,000.
yeah,
Um,
that's
and
an
then
interesting. I've not
we
thought about
also were
that.
talking about adding the 369 backup. Um, so that when we're talking about proposed size, um, like you could represent the proposed size of a 3 ton heat pump as actually being 72,000 BTU or whatever that calculates out to.
Yeah,
In your climate, they're more used to heat pumps, but in some climates, people, if you start talking to them about 36,000 BTU of heat, when that equipment is actually capable of producing 70,000 BTU of heat,
yeah.
um, the chance of losing them is significantly reduced because they don't look like they don't feel like they're standing on the edge of a cliff.
Yeah, they're not as worried. I have not done the showing the variation of like here's the range that of capacity, but I like that a lot. And I know I hadn't included the heat kit output to the heating capacity whenever I'd been doing it. I know Reedy has, and I think that would be the most optimal way of doing it, of being able to go, okay, with the three stages of heat on a 3-ton heat pump, if your heating capacity is from what 8,000 BTUs up to 72,000 BTUs, like showing that wide of a range, like that's going to put a lot of people at ease knowing that the unit's going to be capable of that.
Right,
Uh, I
right.
like that a lot.
So, and it allows you to offer, depending on their panel capacity, or offer it anyway and tell them they just a 369 and a 5, 10, 15.
If they're going heat pump, I don't know if I would offer the 5, 10, 15 because on a 3-ton heat pump, like that lower 3 kW helps a lot. That's what really makes the electric reheat work as well as it does. You upsize,
Because it adds so
yeah,
little heat back.
yeah,
It doesn't shut the equipment off.
yeah, and
Whereas
so
5 kW might actually shut the equipment off.
um, well, it
Wouldn't
will.
the equipment throttle up?
Well, from watching it, from what I've kind of noticed, it seems like when it does kick in when it kicks into electric reheat, it is already running at a fairly high output, and then it's just bringing on, because I mean, even 3 kW, like that's a decent bit of heat, especially when you're in cooling weather. Um, and so, which I say this is also me probably being more climate biased now that I think about it,
Okay.
because in a colder climate, that might make a lot more sense because the trade-off might be worth it now that I think about it.
Yeah, I'm thinking that, I mean, you want the equipment. So you don't see reheat, the second stage coming on for reheat. I mean, does the second stage not come on for reheat for those?
As far as what it is capable of doing, I really don't know, but I've
Okay.
not seen it.
And it
Oh,
wants to run low and slow on the compressor so it can run cold.
um, which the compressor ramps up, the when it's in
Compressor
regular.
ramps up and the heat comes on low. I would think that the heat would want to come on higher as that compressor is pulling latent, but maybe it's not pulling really that, but the reheat's coming on to replace the latent.
Yes. Yes, it's making up for that sensible, but, like, if,
I'm
you know,
sorry, it's sensible.
yeah, but even, like, you take a 3-ton heat pump, so if it's doing full capacity, you're still, like, when it's dehumidifying, you're still gonna be, like, 15-ish thousand BTUs at 100% for the sensible cooling. And so
Okay.
that's not a whole lot even at 100%. If it's running, at say 60% output,
Oh,
it's like
so in
it's
other
such a
words, you want the smaller stages so the system
it matches
can
better.
match the sensible replacement.
Yes.
And because it's doing dehumidification, the sensible replacement ends up being the smaller part of the cooling that it's doing.
Yes.
Because now most of its cooling load is because it's running a cold coil.
Mhm.
Most of the cooling load is latent rather than
Yes.
sensible. I guess I've never, I have no idea what that looks like.
Yeah, and
All the
and I
equipment wants to do nothing but sensible now. And so this equipment
yeah.
actually can pivot to really leaning heavy into latent,
Yeah. Yeah.
which I guess, I mean, capacity is capacity. And if you eat up capacity with latent, then there's not that much sensible left.
Yeah. And I which obviously none of us know unless you are a carrier engineer who is
This
getting
is
the
a Jeff
controls, you
Howard
don't know.
meeting.
Yeah, we're
We need Jeff Howard here.
Yeah. Which even like I don't think they even really tell you like they don't tell you the
Yeah, but he
details of it.
probably understands it and he
Oh
went
yeah.
and figured it out,
Oh yeah.
knowing him, don't you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Cuz
He
like that's
probably he's probably like, yeah, those guys, they don't even really realize some of the things that they're doing.
yeah. Yeah, because you know, in
Ronnie
like
might know some of this stuff too. I mean,
yeah,
they're in perfect country, right?
oh yeah. And like if you can, I mean, you can figure out a lot of this off of just watching the equipment run, which is
Yeah.
that's how I've kind of figured out what I've figured out because they don't tell you anything. It's
Uh,
just when you kind
yep.
of break some of these things down of like what's the ideal, because really the ideal is if it goes into electric reheat, you would like it to output the same temperature that your set point is, so that way it can run nonstop and it never change the temperature.
And never satisfy the
Yeah,
thermostat,
and then it can just throttle
but
the
not
electric reheat
not
on and off.
slide either.
Yes, exactly. And so that's where having that lower heat
Having
kit
smaller
makes it
smaller
easier to deal with.
Right, right, right. It's not going from 5 to 10, it's going from 3 to 6.
Yeah, from a controls
And it
perspective.
and it can shuttle back and forth maybe between 3 and 6. And then
Mhm.
9 probably never gets used for reheat because
I
the
doubt it.
equipment's there's never it's never going to be able to pull that much of the sensible out because it's running for pulling latent.
Yeah, because I mean, when you if you kick in, I mean, you kick in 6 kW, of heat during the summer, like you're adding a lot of heat back into the space,
That's a
which you don't.
lot. That is a very powerful dehumidifier.
Yes,
If that's the amount of sensible being replaced.
yes. And so, I mean, because I mean, the you would
And
have
they're
to
just
be at a.
guessing, really,
Yes, they
in their
are.
algorithms because they don't have. I mean, the sensor at the thermostat's a little too far away from this. They would need sensors in the duct.
Yes, to do it accurately, you would want a supply temp sensor. That's that in commercial. That's how they do that. Is
Right.
you have a
They
supply temp
know as
sensor.
opposed to guessing.
Yeah, that, and you also would the heat kit will typically be controlled by an SCR or a silicon controlled resistor to vary the output of the heat strips by 0 to 100%, and then reach a desired supply temp set point when it's in electric reheat. That's
Oh,
how
wow.
ideally that you would approach that, because then you can have things dialed in
Complicated
perfect.
controls.
Yeah,
Maybe
which
Haven will come up with that.
the problem with that with residential is that everything's proprietary and no one agrees.
Right,
If
right,
if
right.
they
You know,
see, because like commercial, everything it's an open protocol. You have, now let's see, it used to be LAN and now it's BACnet. So it's like everybody is agreeing to this protocol like the internet. Like, everybody
right.
connects to the internet to make it all work. Residential, everybody has their own
Is their
internet,
own internet.
and you can't tie into their internet
And
because
the
they don't tell you
internets
what
don't
it
talk
is.
to each other.
No, not at all. And that's
Yeah,
why
I got it.
that's why it kind of sucks compared to the commercial side, even though the actual, like, the controls isn't that much more sophisticated. Like, with commercial, as a technician, you can go out and from scratch build one of these types of systems and program it yourself, and it's not that difficult. But the reason they're able to do it is because it's got those very basic building blocks of being open protocol, and you can go grab this controller and put it into a train, SC control system, and put that on a carrier unit, and and you can like mix and match everything and make it work as you want it to. But residential, they're like, we've got our own thing, take it or leave it.
Right.
And so it would be nice, because I mean, like Haven, that's what makes them super nice, is because they can they just kind of take what little the current manufacturers give, being like, okay, on the G terminal, if you put power here, we'll turn the fan on, and then they can just take what little they're given there and add controls with external equipment like ventilating dehumidifiers or fresh air ventilators or just dampers and things like that.
Hmm. Well, it's over an hour, and we've been rambling around and around and
Yeah.
and going off on different tangents and
Oh
stuff.
yeah.
Do we? I think we. Was there anything else? I guess when I'm looking at this, let me go. Where is it? I can't even remember
Yeah.
where I am.
Which I feel like we got through a good chunk of because we have the new process outline. We got towards the end for the
Yeah, so we didn't go
checklist.
through this, but basically, you know,
Oh yeah, the
this
checklist.
this is pretty nice. What's that?
Yeah, yeah,
And then, this is the checklist that actually is pulled from the visit steps, and it won't be in the visit steps once we get the checklist figured out. Um, and this, I think, is like some of the stuff below the fold is what I've done is when it changes enough, I just copy and then paste to the top so that we can go back through the way it was before. So there's a lot of extraneous stuff there. So process outline, checklist, and then script, um, which probably is going to have to get tied back to the visit steps as the visit steps evolves.
yeah.
Um,
I kind of feel like for the script, what it may have to just kind of come down to is have uh, checkpoints or intentional things, like just a bullet point list of like, here's what we're trying to achieve uh, with at this section, and then under that, just be like, and here's some like examples of like snippets you can use, because a lot of that's just going to be so variable that I don't know if having a word by word script is going to be doable, but you can have a like, okay, uh, why am I here? It's like the intention is to find out why you're there. Here's a few example, questions that you can use in this situation. So then that way it's just kind of guidance steps and guardrails for someone to kind of have training as a salesperson to get where they kind of need to be. Or they can just copy paste those and make their own script if they want to do that. But I just feel like every time I've
Oh,
tried to
oh, oh.
follow it,
So the point of it is, yeah, the point of it is to eventually have it be part of the process built into the software. And
yeah,
that's the reason um, this is getting the script right so that we can go back and review the process and make changes to the process where the script is wrong.
yeah.
Did I make any kind of sense with that?
Um, which I don't know, maybe we're just defining
Thinking,
script a little because I guess to me, I'm kind of thinking as a script being like, what is the words that the salesperson needs to say at each step? I think that might be a little too
okay, so
difficult
I
because
guess
it,
when I'm thinking about it here, um, it's not the words.
but more just the workflow.
This see the way I put it in here,
Yeah,
it actually is the flow.
yeah,
So this it does have script in the front so that you set the visit up properly. But then it goes straight into the software, with the hints.
yeah,
We make sure that we get these hints right. Um, get all this stuff in the right order. Like somewhere in here is static pressure. Get the static pressure put in the right order, and how to communicate that. So really, most of it is not like extraneous script. It's the actual pre-quote processing software part of it.
yeah,
Um, I mean, I know that there's and once people get good at this, they end up being off script or they have their own ways of teaching certain concepts.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that
I
I'm
think so.
totally good with that, but that's more like black belt level, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is. It's definitely a higher belt, which I mean, there anyone that uses the process, you're gonna need to you're gonna need to get to that higher level to really make use of it, to get the most out of it that you can.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's going to be a bunch of people that use it. They're going to be sort of the people that there may be a bunch of people that are at risk of losing their jobs because their revenue per lead is below 4,000.
Yeah,
And if your revenue per lead is less than 4,000, um, it's a Hail Mary.
yeah,
And if they lean into using this, it's going to help because, we've had people have revenue per lead above 10,000 in some months and have it be very, very high some years. Like Reedy's revenue per lead, I think for last year was above 9 grand, wasn't it? Something
yeah. I think it
outrageous.
was, which is crazy.
Yeah. And so, um, you know, if somebody's at 4, or 3,500 and they need to get to 4,500 to keep their job, 4,500 is a long way away from 9.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of opportunity for improvement. They don't have to be Reedy or Ronnie level doing this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They just need to be better than who they are.
Yeah.
And it's going to be really hard not to be better than that. I don't got to outrun the bear. I just got to outrun you, is where
Yeah.
they are.
Yeah.
They're a fat guy putting on tennis shoes because their other buddy's a fat guy with boots on. And then there are going to be some people, some of the people Ronnie work with actually are fairly competitive. And they don't like being number 2, number 3, number 5. Number 5s, they want to be on the podium. They want to be at least 3. And the guy that's 2 or 3 all the time, he'd like to get to 1 once in a while. And those guys, I think, probably have the ambition that, particularly as we make this easier and easier to learn and deploy, this should be very appealing for them. I mean, right now, I think the people with ambition to learn this can learn it by just going to Kajabi and then signing up for an account.
Mm-hmm.
And then probably looking through some of the videos. We got a lot of content in these videos.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, there could definitely be a lot of valuable stuff that, I mean, you just take a few tools away and start using it, like you're going to do better. And that's, I mean, that kind of goes with anything and everyone.
Yeah, it's too bad that the guys don't get penalized really for sales that have callbacks, where the callbacks are attributable to what happened at the kitchen table.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of callbacks are due to mistakes at the kitchen table. And so as guys are using this process, their revenue per lead maybe goes up a little bit, but customer sat goes through the roof and mistakes go through the floor. So I wish there was a way to measure that. But a lot of these companies they're not even keeping a warranty reserve anymore.
Oh boy.
So it's like, how are you ever going to track warranty calls that are due to the kitchen table as opposed to a bad install if you're
Yeah.
not even keeping track of warranty?
Hmm.
It just seems dumb to me.
Yeah.
I'd like to see warranty broken out better, because if I'm running that company, I want to know these warranty calls because the salesman's screwing up or because the installers are screwing up. I want to know who to whip.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you would think so, but I don't know. It's strange. I guess the thought process is that if you just bring in enough money, then it just washes out or something. But I mean, that just seems like a glaring inefficiency that as a business
It seems
you
like they're like, oh, it's too hard to get these numbers, and so we'll just pretend they don't matter.
would yeah. Yeah.
Right? I mean,
We'll just pretend it doesn't exist.
This is why these venture capital, what do they call it? Private equity.
Mm-hmm.
Why these private equity firms, they blow up after a while because they stop keeping track of the numbers that are hard to keep track of because they're too hard to keep track of. And then the company explodes because they may have been hard to keep track of, but they were important.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I think a lot of that is just when you have private equity they have
Other people's
no
money.
understanding of the business or of the
Right.
industry itself. It's like they don't realize that callbacks is something that can be a salesman screw up. They probably only view it as like
An install
It just,
problem.
yeah, it just happened. Like, oh well, sometimes you just get equipment, and that
Oh, these
kind
are
of thing just
yeah,
happens.
right. Oh my God, it's just something broke.
Yeah,
Stuff breaks.
yeah,
People have problems that aren't avoidable. Um, well, and this I think eventually, knock on wood, HVAC 2.0 works and starts getting deployed by companies is ends up being an opportunity for competitive advantage to
yes,
make those other companies fail quicker.
hmm,
The companies that can't deliver on quality will start to suffer if it's easier to deliver quality.
yes. Oh, definitely. Especially once that kind of gets known about, because then that's a marketable thing that you can like leverage on your end as to consumers, to salespeople, to employees. Like, you know, then it starts to become a real problem for those types of companies.
Well, should we go to after hours?
Let's do it. Well, all right. Well, thanks everyone for coming, and we'll catch you back again in 2 weeks.
Thanks, everyone.